Again, thanks for coming today. I'm going to read a brief statement, and then I'll try and answer a few questions. Keep in mind, Kenny is my attorney, and I'm going to listen to my attorney, and if he says don't answer something, I'm not. Before I start, I want to point this out. Everything that I'm about to tell you, I am willing to say under oath. I am willing to say in front of a grand jury with my hand on the Bible, and I challenge the others to be willing to do the same. I know the events of the past few days have been hard for my family. It's been hard for the Bentley family. And most of all, it's been hard for the people of Alabama. My career has been dedicated to public service and law enforcement. I am proud to have served honorably for over 15 years, twice receiving a governor's commendation for service beyond call of duty. I was honored in 2010 to be chosen as Governor Bentley's Director of Homeland Security, and then in 2013 as Alabama's first Secretary of Law Enforcement. And I fully believe that I served in both positions with honor and integrity. I was proud to serve alongside men and women who every day put their life on the line for the citizens of Alabama. Unfortunately, Governor Robert Bentley, who I considered a close personal friend for over 15 years, within the last several weeks, made the decision to terminate 4 hard-working law enforcement employees whose only crime was to do their job, to follow the law, and they were loyal to me. Another 4 law enforcement officers were transferred for the very same reason. It is not fair to these fine men and women. It's not fair to me, and most importantly, it's not fair to the people of this state. My relationship with Governor Bentley was positive for the better part of almost 15 years. As I mentioned earlier, I considered him both a close personal friend, and in fact, at times, I even looked at him as a father figure. I saw the first sign of change in Governor Robert Bentley in August of 2014. I became aware of a text message that was sent from Ms. Rebecca Mason to Governor Bentley. The text message was accidentally intercepted by Governor Bentley's body man, his personal security. That man was Sergeant Stan Stabler. Sergeant Stabler accidentally picked up Governor Bentley's cell phone as he left it in the Suburban, and on the cell phone there was a text that was sexual in nature. Sergeant Stabler brought that to the attention of his supervisor at that time, which was Chief Wendell Ray Lewis. Chief Lewis then brought the complaint to my attention. This was in early August. The convention was August 1st through 3rd in Point Clear, Alabama at the BCA conference. During that same week, in fact on August 5th, Chief Lewis came into my office and played me parts of an audio recording in which Governor Bentley and Rebecca Mason were participating in an inappropriate sexual conversation. The tape was brought to my attention by Chief Lewis, who received it from a Bentley family member. Member of Governor Bentley's family was on the phone with Chief Lewis while the tape was being played in my presence. On that same date, on August the 5th, at approximately 5 o'clock, I dismissed Governor Bentley's security detail that day, and Sergeant Lewis and I took over Governor Bentley's security and drove him to Greenville. There was a political event in Greenville. During this trip, I made a statement to Governor Bentley, and I'll repeat it to you. I told Governor Bentley that I loved him like a father, and there was nothing I wouldn't do for him except lie to a grand jury. I made Governor Bentley aware of the recording that I heard. I told Governor Bentley there was no need to try and explain it for anything other than it was. It was very obvious that it was sexual in nature. Governor Bentley simply hung his head and asked for advice and how to get out of it. At that point, I explained to Governor Bentley it would be a crime if he has used state resources to facilitate a relationship, or if he used campaign funds to facilitate the relationship. Governor Bentley assured me that he had done neither. At that point, Governor Bentley gave me his word that he would terminate the relationship immediately. I left Governor Bentley at Greenville with uniformed troopers at that point and returned home. At 6:30 the next morning, and phone records should be able to validate this. Governor Bentley called me on my cell phone and stated that he could not go through with it and end the relationship with Mrs. Mason. I again reiterated to Governor Bentley what the law was and advised him if he did the things I mentioned that he would be committing a felony. From August of 2014 until the present, it has become apparent to me that Rebecca Mason has wielded a level of influence over both the governor and state government that I have never seen in all my years of public service. That includes serving almost 9 years in the state legislature. I have received complaints about our actions from law enforcement, government officials, other cabinet members, and members of the Bentley family. At the end of 2014, Governor Bentley made it clear to me in no uncertain terms that from that point forward, anyone that questioned Rebecca's influence would be fired. In early February, I informed Governor Bentley that ALEA was investigating an allegation into improper conduct involving the Attorney General's office. Special Agent Jack Wilson, who worked in special investigations and intelligence and who has a record that is impeccable, was assigned to do the investigation. Special Agent Jack Wilson conducted the investigation and concluded nothing improper was done by the Attorney General's office. On February 16th, I met with Governor Bentley, his legal advisor, David Byrne. Rebecca Mason was present. The governor's personal attorney, Joe Espy, was present, as well as members of my senior staff and my staff attorney. I made Governor Bentley aware that the Attorney General's office had requested an affidavit and that both myself and Special Agent Wilson would be submitting an affidavit as it was part of our job and our obligation as law enforcement officers. Governor Bentley instructed me to tell Matt Hardy, the Attorney General's office, that ALEA's investigation was still ongoing and not to do the affidavit. That was untrue. The investigation was done and we had concluded it. The following morning after that conversation, the governor's legal advisor, David Byrne, worked with my lawyer on editing an affidavit that was eventually submitted to the Attorney General's office. On February 16th, or at the February 16th meeting, both Rebecca Mason and Governor Bentley were both furious with me and my staff regarding the submission of the affidavit. Both Rebecca Mason and the governor yelled and ridiculed both me and my staff in the presence of the governor, in the presence of non-law enforcement officials, and both discussed law enforcement sensitive information. To say she was furious would be an understatement. As part of my law enforcement career, I've taught kinesics and taught body language. She had a level of anger that I've rarely seen as a law enforcement officer. Over the next few days, Rebecca Mason and Governor Bentley took action to end the careers I mentioned earlier. 4 law enforcement employees have done absolutely nothing wrong. Their names were made public. They were embarrassed. Their jobs were ended immediately, to the point where they received a call after lunch being told their insurance would end at 5 p.m. These men and women did not deserve this, and the people of Alabama did not deserve this. Yesterday I found out via social media that I was being accused of misusing funds. Let me be clear, this is 100% untrue. As I mentioned earlier, I'll gladly say this in front of a grand jury or swear to it. I have and will continue to cooperate with the Attorney General's office in any aspect, whether looking into some trumped up investigation by Stan Stabler or the governor, or the actions of the governor. I also found out yesterday via social media that I was terminated. I'll repeat what I told the governor on August 5th, 2014. I love you like a father, but I won't lie to a grand jury for you. I said that then and I say that now. I will tell the truth. I refused, my crime is this, I refused to lie to the Attorney General's office. And I signed an affidavit that was part of my job that I am required to do as a law enforcement officer. Those who work for me that I mentioned have paid the ultimate price for this, as I have. This is not the way government should work. This is not the way law enforcement should work. Elected officials should not be able to yield this much power over criminal investigations. The people of this state deserve better. Governor Bentley was elected by an overwhelming majority of the people of this state, but Rebecca Mason was not elected by anyone. And the level of influence that she is yielding makes her the de facto governor. That part concerns me because I believe the result has been undue and dangerous interference into operations and open investigations within the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, both in terms of personnel movement and active investigations that were closed or ordered closed immediately as I walked out the door, contrary to my orders. I'll finish by saying this. I mentioned that Ms. Mason is not elected. I don't even think we know who even pays Ms. Mason. I don't think anyone knows where her pay comes from. But I do know this. Governor Robert Bentley is not the same man I knew and served in the legislature with and considered one of the best friends that I ever had. And for that I am saddened. I'll wrap up by saying this. None of this is to cast any ill will or any accusations against the men and women of law enforcement, the hardworking men and women. I'm talking about the people doing the job at ALEA. I'm not talking about the leadership, because they've made some very bad decisions. With that, there's a ton of you guys here. I'll try and answer some questions. And Mary, I see you jumping up and down back there.
You mentioned the governor possibly committed a felony in this relationship. What crimes were broke? What crimes did he commit? And why are you talking about this now, the day after you were fired, and not a year ago, more than a year ago when you found out?
Well, I'll work backwards. I'll answer the first one. I actually came out with this yesterday to John Archibald before I learned I was fired. So that part came out. I told the governor if he was using state dollars to facilitate the relationship, that would be a felony. He assured me he was not doing that. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying he did. I'm saying what I told him. If you're using state money, if you're leasing a state plane to keep a manifest private, that's a crime to do that. Why am I just coming out now? From a law enforcement standpoint, I believed him that day. From a personal standpoint, I don't have a good reason. And to Diane Bentley, I apologize, and I am sorry.
Spencer,
Bill.
I wanted to ask you about these active investigations that were closed. Is this part of the reason why you're coming out to
Yes.
Because that seems to have been covered up at the ALEA. Can you tell us any more about those active investigations?
There were two, and again, Bill, the structure of ALEA is we had a special investigations unit. There were two active investigations, public corruption investigations. The last thing I said walking out the door was to maintain Special Agent Wilson in place and keep those investigations going. We were working in partnership with the Attorney General's office. I was told within a week the investigations were closed and the paperwork was taken from Special Agent Wilson.
did you write this letter that's attributed to you to Chuck?
What letter?
A letter that is attributed to you that was written to Chuck D.
I can already tell you there's so much text on there. No, I didn't write that. Okay, well, that's a full press release. Okay, tell me who you're with.
I'm Bob Gimbakerta. I'm not the independent.
Yes.
You did write that?
Yes.
Were you angry when you wrote it?
No, I'm not angry now. My feelings are hurt wild. But no, I'm not angry.
Mr. Collier.
I will say this. I'm a little, and Chuck's here, I believe, right?
Right here.
The April, I think I mentioned the February 16th meeting. Within 20 minutes of walking out of that meeting, Chuck called my executive counsel and knew all the details of the meeting. And I understand you guys have sources, and I would never want you to give up your sources. My problem with that is we discussed very sensitive law enforcement information in that meeting, and within 20 minutes, and maybe Chuck's a hell of a reporter, but within 20 minutes, Chuck had all the details of that meeting. So if I'm angry that someone broke the law and gave up law enforcement sensitive information. But I'm not, do I seem angry now? My feelings are hurt.
Do you think the governor is trying to protect someone, and if so, who?
I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, because of the ongoing nature of this, can't mention that right now.
would it be the people the investigations that were ended when you were terminated? Or when you were reassigned, put on leave?
I mean, I would be guessing the answer to that, I don't know.
Do you plan any legal action? Were you given benefits on your?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I haven't even been given the courtesy of a phone call or a text message. I learned from one of y'all's text messages, one of y'all's social medias.
Kenny,
It's so early right now to decide what exactly we're going to do. The main thing that we're looking at is to clear his name and to meet with the Attorney General's office, and if there's any confusion about it, we don't know what the charges are or anything about what they were supposedly accusing him of doing wrong, which led to the termination, or so they say. So we're looking at that.
but
There
he
is a
serves at the
possibility.
pleasure of, so any type of termination action.
Well, without saying exactly, about this, because it's too early for me to know, but if you get fired, even if you're an employee at will, you can't fire somebody for cooperating with the grand jury.
In fact, it's a felony.
Yeah, and he was in putting it, and if that's the motivation behind it, that would open up some doors. Again, it's just so early, all this came about last couple of days, but
Thank you.
it'll be something, I'll keep your fingers
I
sharp.
apologize, I don't know your name.
Alan Blinder from the New York Times. Do you have any evidence or thought that the governor used any state aircraft improperly? You mentioned that. Did you ever know of him using DPS or ALEA planes?
I don't have personal knowledge of that. However, complaints from his security staff and from his staff were levied. I did challenge a staff member and attempted to interview him over this, and he broke down. This is 2 years ago, he broke
Mr.
down.
Collier,
What was the,
Let me
what were
finish.
those complaints about? What were the nature of those complaints? What,
Misuse of state aircraft.
have you spoken to a federal investigator? Has it been a state matter?
I'm not getting specifics who I've spoken to.
You mentioned that Rebecca Mason wielded a kind of power that you had never seen in your career. Could you give us some examples of what you're referring to?
Well, if you guys go back, and I'm trying to think of, some of you cover the budget cuts, when the individual agencies set out what the budget cuts were. That meeting was conducted with Rebecca Mason, and she helped every agency determine what our cuts and what our actions were gonna be.
Did she order the parks closed or the
Bill, I don't know,
license offices?
I don't know if she ordered it, but she worked on I can speak for the driver's license part, because it was ours. She was deeply involved in that, which, what's her title? I think senior political advisor or something. That's her title. Sorry, Kim.
Can you give us some specifics of the conversation, the recording? Was it an in-person conversation, a phone conversation? Do you hear both parties, one party, and can you give us a little bit more about what was said on that call?
Yeah, do you see any reason? I mean, it's been printed. I guess John scooped everyone got it. I can say this unequivocally. There was no way to explain it as anything other than sexual or romantic in nature. Body parts were mentioned, and at one point a statement was given: if we're going to do what we did yesterday, we need to lock the door.
Did you hear one end of the conversation or both?
There were two voices. I can distinctly, I can assure you that was Governor Robert Bentley's voice. The other just female.
Do you know it was Rebecca
I
Purcell?
can't. I would, and at one point when I confronted the governor on this August 5th, he said, well, that could have been someone in my family. That's just not the case.
What are you saying, that he admitted? Did he admit a relationship?
Yes.
Did he admit saying something inappropriate?
Less than a month ago, the governor told me that he was still madly in love with Rebecca Mason, but he was a man of honor and wouldn't ask her to divorce her husband.
How do you respond to
That's
Stan
not-
Stabler's denial of your charge that he found this sexually charged text
I think the
message he said
easiest,
didn't happen?
yeah, I think the easiest answer, Chuck, is let's find Ray Lewis and ask Ray Lewis. Stan brought it to his supervisor's attention, and then I was Ray's supervisor, he brought it to my attention. What I'd recommend is find Ray Lewis and ask Ray Lewis. He'll tell you the truth.
Do you feel that Rebecca Mason's relationship with the governor and vice versa got in the way of state business, and did it harm state business? Based on what you know.
It was just a level of influence. You know, she yielded more influence than Seth Hammett did, I can tell you that.
Who made these recordings?
Well, that was part of us looking into it. The governor, as most of you know, carries a security clearance, so one of the things that always concerns us is potential for blackmail. Something was brought to my attention, I was concerned about that, make sure someone was not surreptitiously recording the governor. That could be used to challenge his security clearance. Through our investigation, we quickly determined that it was a domestic situation, and it was done within the family. And my recommendation to the governor at that point was, it's obviously domestic in nature.
Did a member of the family give you the tape?
No, a member of the family emailed it to Chief Lewis, and then they were on the phone with Chief Lewis while it was played for me.
Was this his son,
It was several members of us.
Sever?
Who else knows about this? I mean, obviously, these rumors have been out there for quite a while. A lot of people.
Everyone in the inner office of the governor, most everyone in the legislature.
And what would you say to people who do have direct knowledge about these events?
Yeah, there's nothing I can say to them. I'll just repeat this to Diane Bentley, who I've also known for 15 years. She's the victim in this, and his sons are the victim in this. And these people, these non-politicos that the governor just walked in and fired, they're the victims. So if I say anything to anyone, it's to her, and I'm sorry, is what I say to her.
Were you forced in some way to change or
No.
submit that affidavit?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, the change in the affidavit was facilitated between my executive counsel and the AG's office, Mr. Hart. Matt and I never had a conversation about what was going to be changed in an affidavit. Matt Hart, who I know has the reputation of being a bulldog, I can tell you has been nothing but a gentleman to me through this investigation.
Do you have any kind of immunity agreement?
Absolutely not, no. I haven't done anything wrong. I think the only wrong that I've committed is not being a better friend to Diane Bentley and to Paul Bentley and the rest of his sons.
Were you ever asked to resign during these last few weeks or months, or were you ever asked to resign during your time as leading ALEA?
No, not until yesterday.
That was an option to resign, and Spencer chose not to.
Why did you decide against it?
Well, I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, would you resign from your job for not doing anything wrong? I mean, just the opposite. I did what my oath requires me to do. I have a duty. In fact, I have a duty not to follow an unlawful order. So I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, the governor would love nothing more for me to resign and go away. I didn't do anything wrong.
From that August 5th meeting, how often would you find yourself discussing the governor's relationship with Ms. Mason? How often did you discuss it with them, or did it ever come up again?
It came up again, not a lot. There were two significant conversations between the beginning of this year and now. Around December 30th, Chuck, you wrote an end of the year story, and part of it was the situation. The governor called me in, I want to say it was December 29th, December 30th. You may remember when you wrote the story, Chuck. The governor received a text from a family member, and the text was, if you don't quit lying to these reporters, we're going to start telling the truth. And it came from a family member of the governor's. He showed it to me. He was upset. He wanted something done. I explained to the governor it was not a crime. They were not threatening him. They were not trying to extort money from him. I told him I felt it was a domestic situation. It was best to be handled within their family. Within a few weeks later, the governor called me back in. Ms. Mason had received a hard copy letter. In the letter, it just basically said you should be ashamed of yourself for breaking up a family. And that's a summary. I don't remember word for word. Again, I explained to the governor this is not a crime. They're not. No one's threatening you. No one's exploiting it. So it's not a crime.
Rebecca Caldwell Mason is paid out of what's a dark money group. Do you have any knowledge of who puts money into that organization?
I don't. I do think there is some concern of mitigation dollars, federal mitigation dollars going into that, and that's just, I think, one of you guys.
You mentioned that you and the governor had a basically positive relationship for the time you worked together. When did it become strained, and what issue kind of began to unravel the sweater, so to speak?
Well, if you go back to the state of the state, I mean, two cabinet members were mentioned and praised. I was one of them. So, I mean, the governor may say now he didn't think I was doing a good job, but at the state of the state, he said I was doing a good job. I mean, the relationship was fine. We tried not to talk about, he knew I didn't approve of the Rebecca situation. Melissa and I knew Diane when we served together, so he knew I didn't approve of it, but the work relationship was okay. The big difference was, I cooperated with the Attorney General's office. The governor's point was this: he said, "I'm the chief magistrate, and I'm telling you not to. I view it differently. I'm a law enforcement officer. I have an obligation to cooperate with the Attorney General's office."
Is the governor worried about having to testify in the my covered
Oh, I
case?
have no idea, Bob. I can't.
Has he ever expressed anything to you about that?
No.
Why do you hire Joe Espy?
I don't know. And
When did Joe Espy begin showing up in meetings?
I saw Joe, the day the governor, it became public that Miss Diane had filed for divorce. It was around 10 that morning. I was out sick that morning. The governor called for me. As I was walking into his office, Joe was walking out. I want to be clear, I'm not here, Joe's doing his job. What was unusual was going into that February 16th meeting and Joe was in there. If I could get a redo, I'm uncomfortable that law enforcement sensitive information was discussed in the presence of Miss Mason and even Joe and Jennifer Artis.
What do you think should be done about all of this going on?
I think it's plain and simple, and someone wrote it a few weeks ago, maybe it was John back there. Bottom line is, impanel a grand jury. I'll sit in front of a grand jury and be happy to raise my hand. I challenge the governor, Miss Mason, and the rest of the senior staff to do the same thing, simply tell the truth.
Do you think the governor
should resign?
I think the governor owes the people of Alabama an explanation. You know, he could start with the 4 people he walked in, or he sent Stan Stabler to walk in and fire and terminate their insurance.
Do you have a copy of any audio or, no?
You were on medical leave. I understand you've gone through some very serious back surgery. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Thanks for asking, Bill. I walk with a little limp now, but it's getting better. You asked if I was mad. No, but it hurts, because some of this, I was literally on the surgeon's table while the governor and Stan Stabler's putting this together. And this is a man that I've given, the last 5 years to, and the last 15 years is one of his best friends.
Are you ready to go back to work?
I want to get healthy and go back to work. Absolutely, I want to go back to work. It may not be in this capacity, but law enforcement's in my blood, and I'm going to get healthy.
So did-
Have you heard from anyone from ALEA? Have you had any contacts? I mean, just to give you, I know you were surprised by the allegations of financial mismanagement and where they found this money. Has anyone given you a window into how they arrived at that number and so forth?
The first I'd heard of it, they initially brought something to Kenny and then they said, well, that's not what were the accusations, and then Chuck actually brought it to my attention yesterday. And I'll say this again, they can turn ALEA upside down. I will cooperate in any way, shape, or form with the Attorney General's office or the FBI. I have not mismanaged a dime. I've done my job. I put together 12 agencies into one, and we did a good job. We did a great job, and it's just a shame to see what we put together be unraveled over just an improper personal relationship.
Do you feel like this was the plan all
Is there any
along?
evidence that persists? Are you sure that there's evidence out there regarding the governor and a relationship? Do you believe there's evidence?
Absolutely, I believe there's evidence, and I haven't read it, but I was just told that Yellowhammer's just released parts of the tape.
Did you know that Mr. Stabler was gonna come in and do an investigation of ALEA?
Absolutely not. I mean, he was only there for 2 days before he found all this amazing mismanagement of money. Prior to that, Sergeant Stabler worked only in executive